There was a time when life didn't feel fully real until it was described. Not out loud, internally. A quiet sentence would form alongside experience almost automatically. This is happening. This is how I feel. This is what this means. Description became a companion to living. Sometimes it felt harmless. Sometimes it felt like clarity. But it also created a subtle distance. Because description is always one step behind the moment. It translates what is happening into words. And translation, even when accurate, is still a layer. As the inner narrator softens, that known layer begins to fade. Life still happens, but the descriptions don't arrive as often, or they arrive late, or they appear briefly and dissolve without taking over. The moment moves without being named, and the absence of naming doesn't make life less intelligible. It makes life closer. At first, this can feel unfamiliar. There's a reflex to label, to frame what's happening in language. It's not even always judgment. Sometimes it's just orientation. I'm tired. I'm stressed. This is a good moment. This is awkward. Those labels feel like they help you locate yourself. But what begins to become clear is this: you can be located without language. You can know what's happening without describing it. The body already knows. Sensation is immediate. Emotion is immediate. Context is immediate. Words are optional. When description is absent, life becomes less organized mentally, but more direct, not more chaotic. More direct. The moment isn't turned into a concept. It remains what it is: a sound, a movement, a look from someone, a shift in the air, a thought passing through, all of it happening without needing to be called anything. This is not a rejection of language. Language remains useful. You still use it to communicate, to plan, to express what needs expressing. But language stops being the default interface between you and experience. It becomes a tool, not a filter. This changes the feeling of being alive. There's less internal narrating, less summarizing, less translating. You don't keep a running account of your day. You don't mentally label each hour. You don't describe your mood to yourself repeatedly. You simply move through experience. And experience is enough. At first, the mind may feel slightly restless, because description used to be a way of staying busy, a way of staying involved. If you weren't describing something, the mind worried you were missing it. But this is a misunderstanding. Description doesn't create presence. Presence creates presence. And presence is already there when nothing is pulling you away. When description relaxes, attention stops splitting. You're no longer living and explaining at the same time. You're just living. This is especially noticeable in conversation. Before, while someone spoke, part of your mind described the interaction. They're upset. I should say something. This is going well. This is uncomfortable. That internal description created a layer of self-consciousness. You weren't fully present with the person. You were partly in a commentary about the situation. Now the commentary softens. You listen more directly, not because you're trying to, because nothing is interrupting. You respond from what's actually happening, not from a description of it. Words come naturally. Pauses feel natural too. You don't fill space to manage perception. You don't explain yourself mid-conversation. You don't narrate your intentions internally. You simply interact. This makes relationships feel simpler, less strained, less managed. Not perfect, just direct. The same shift happens in your own private moments. Sitting alone, making coffee, walking through a store. Previously, these moments were often described internally. This is peaceful. This is boring. I need to do more. Those descriptions created a subtle dissatisfaction, because once you label a moment, you compare it. If it's boring, you want to escape it. If it's peaceful, you want to hold it. If it's neutral, you dismiss it. But when the label doesn't appear, the moment stays open. It doesn't need improvement. It doesn't need to be held. It just passes, and you pass with it. This is where ordinary life begins to feel smoother, not because it becomes more meaningful, because it's no longer being measured. description often turns moments into measurements. Am I okay? Is this good? Is this enough? Without description, measurement fades. You stop checking, not because you decided to, because the habit loses momentum. The moment doesn't feel like something that needs a verdict. It feels like something that's happening. One of the quiet results of this is a drop in inner tension. A lot of tension comes from having to name experience. Because once you name it, you feel responsible for it. If you label yourself as stressed, you feel you should fix it. If you label yourself as tired, you feel you should manage your energy. If you label a moment as awkward, you feel you should correct it. But if the label doesn't form, the responsibility doesn't form either. You might still be tired, still stressed, still in an awkward moment, but those conditions don't become projects. They pass as part of life's flow. And because they're not projects, they often resolve more quickly. Not through effort, through non-interference. The body adjusts, the nervous system settles, the situation changes, and you move on. Description also affects memory. When you describe a moment, you record it differently. You create a narrative snapshot. You store the label rather than the experience. Now, with less description, memory becomes less conceptual. You may remember less, but what you remember feels more real. Not as a story, as a sensation, a scene, a tone. This creates a different relationship with your past. Less narrative, less interpretation, more simple recall. And because the past isn't constantly being described internally, it has less influence over the present. You don't drag your story into every moment. You meet each moment more freshly. This also changes planning. Before, planning was heavily language-based. A sequence of internal descriptions. Here's what I need to do. Here's how it should go. Here's what I'll say. Now, planning still happens, but it becomes lighter. You plan what's necessary. Then you stop. You don't rehearse it endlessly. You don't keep describing the future, because describing the future creates pressure. It creates a mental world that reality then has to match. Without constant description of the future feels less demanding. You remain more available to what actually happens, which usually differs from what was described anyway. A major part of suffering is the gap between description and reality. This is how it should be. This is how it is. The narrator lives in description. Reality lives in sensation. When you reduce description, the gap narrows. Not because reality changes, because expectation weakens. You're not constantly constructing a world in your head that the world must conform to. You're meeting the world as it is. This creates an ease that is hard to explain, because explanation itself belongs to description. It's not that you become blissful, it's that you become less divided, less split between life and the mental version of life. This split is subtle, but it's constant for most people. And when it relaxes, the body notices. Breathing changes, shoulders soften, the face relaxes, not because you're doing anything, because the internal workload drops. Life is no longer being translated all day, it's simply being lived. You may notice that you speak less internally. There are fewer sentences running in your head, less self-talk, less labeling. That internal quiet isn't dramatic. It's just absence of unnecessary speech. And with that absence, there's more room for direct experience. Sounds feel clearer. Colors feel more vivid. Not in a mystical way, in a practical way, because attention isn't split. You're not half in description, half in life. You're mostly in life. This also changes how you relate to your own inner states. Before, you may have described them constantly. I'm anxious. I'm fine. I'm not fine. I'm angry. I shouldn't be angry. Those descriptions created a loop. You described a state, reacted to the description, described the reaction, and so on. Now, with less description, the loop weakens. A feeling arises. It is felt, passes. There's no second layer of talking about it. This creates emotional simplicity, not emotional flatness. Simplicity. You stop turning your own experience into an ongoing conversation with yourself. You let it be. There's a quiet maturity in this. Not a maturity that feels superior, a maturity that feels practical, like realizing you don't need to narrate every step to walk. You just walk. Life moves without description, and when it does, it becomes obvious that description was never required for living. It was a habit, a layer added by the mind, sometimes useful, often unnecessary. As this habit fades, life returns to its natural state, immediate, unedited, unexplained, and still completely workable. You can live without constantly telling yourself what's happening, because what's happening is already happening. You don't need to translate it to participate in it. You only need to be here, and being here doesn't require words. It requires availability. It requires allowing the moment to unfold without wrapping it in language. Life moves. You move with it, and nothing needs to be said about it.